All right, Paul Hefty here with 492W. I want to talk about the W course writing and referencing expectations. It's real important we'll use this method throughout so that I'm consistent with the protocol of assessment. So writing 101, everything you're doing for the class, we're going to use what's called a TRI method, meaning every answer, every part of every question, you need to answer using these three pieces. First, you want to state your position. That's your thesis statement. This can be anything. This is your opinion, your position. What you want to do is state that clearly right at the beginning. After that, then, though, you need to reinforce it, and the key here is you must cite a credible reference and do it correctly. And we'll talk about that and give you concrete examples. Again, this supports your position, and this is where the research comes in. If you don't do this, then it's just an opinion, and you set yourself up for failure. And that's what a lot of businesses do, is they simply do something they like, they haven't researched it, and then again, it's just open to a lot of mistakes. By doing your research, either people that have done it really well or have made those mistakes, then you're setting yourself up for the possibility of success. Lastly, then, though, and this is key, is you need to illustrate and give me a concrete example of how you're going to do it. So you'll give your position, the T. You'll cite a reference of how somebody else has done it or has made the mistake to support your position. The illustration cannot be someone else's way of doing it. This is where you need to give a specific example of how you're going to do it in your business. So use I statements. I will lead by example is a good way of doing that. So what we're thinking about is you're going to do TRI for every answer. You're going to tell me what you want to do, make it clear. You're going to go ahead and say why and support that with citing a reference, a quality and credible reference, and you can use multiple ones here. And then last, you want to finish up by giving me a concrete example or illustration of how you are going to do it. I will or we will, da da da. So what is a thesis? Real simple here. It's a statement where it just gets across your position, your main point. You need to be clear, concise, and you need to present it right away. You can expand on it after that if you want, but that first sentence should state your position right away. The one way to do that is think about announcing your position and a point of view that then you're going to start to defend with your references. Again, you want to support that with evidence from research, and you have to cite something. If you don't cite it and just talk about it as you are, you're not going to get the point. So you're going to see throughout the course, most of the assessments, it's going to be some number of 3, and that's what I'll look for in each answer. Again, you should ideally sum up your argument in one sentence to start with your position, and then you can expand on it. It's best to start with a thesis and a business plan so that you talk about exactly how you're going to do it. One way to start designing a thesis, though, is to kind of work in reverse. So this is where the research comes in. The research isn't as fun at first because it's a little time consuming doing readings and taking notes. But that's the key to this course in the business design. So start out doing that. You'll have an idea in your head of maybe how you're going to do it. That would be the illustration. But then your research may change the way you do that. Specifically, if you keep an open mind, you could completely change and get a new perspective on how you're going to do things. Again, that's the goal of the research sharing with the discussion boards, which we call the CPDs, continuing professional development, is that we can get some new ideas, some new information, some new research, and then you can go ahead and change that and use each other's information. One key point here, once you've done your TRI, go back to the rubric, read the instruction, and make sure what you've answered and how you've answered it fits what the rubric specifically talked for. Sometimes you can go off on a tangent and it doesn't address that. Again, my assessment is going to be based specifically on the questions I've asked you and then the TRI being specific to that. One last thing, can your thesis change? Absolutely. You're going to see with the projects, the first part you're going to repeat with some minor changes or additions that I'll ask you to do as we learn more too. So Absolutely. Hopefully it does. A big test here, though, at the end is it should be easy to pick out the thesis, because again, this should be your position right at the beginning. And you'll see it should stick to us. We'll talk about that in the second half of the course with the Made to Stick textbook. And then third, you must support it, the R, with citing a reference. It's reinforced, but it's also reference in that. And then your I needs to be a clear illustration of how you will do it. Think of the I as also an illustration, but also as an I statement. So how do we cite a reference? First thing we're going to do is everything you're doing when you go look for how to cite references or list your references is you're going to use an APA style. That's the accepted style in the health industry. So this prepares you for writing articles and books and things as you get into your careers later on. You're going to use in-text citations. These are typically where you just summarize or paraphrase. You're not going to do direct quotes. I would argue this needs to be most of your citations. So again, what's key here is you'll see is you have to go ahead and cite the author, the last name, and this is the textbook here of health fitness management. So here's your example of how to cite that. We've got 3 different authors, so you would go ahead and do all 3 names, last names, and then you need to do comma and the year of the publication. Again, that needs to be in parentheses, so it's easy for me to find references being cited within your documents and your projects. I just look for these parentheses. If you're doing a direct quote, now obviously you need to add the page number. Key piece here, if you are using digital books and so forth, and there's not page numbers, then what they ask is for the paragraph number. And again, there's examples here from Canvas of how to find that. If you're doing quotes longer than 40 words, then you need to block this out free from the written document, and you don't need to use the quotation marks. But again, you need to have in parentheses the author's last names, the year of publication, and then the page number and or a paragraph. Personal communications, this is huge. These are when you're doing interviews or other forms of unpublished communication. Good example here. All the lectures that I'm doing, if you're citing anything from a lecture, that's unpublished, so that would be a personal communication. If you're using some personal experiences from your connections of your internships, 495, or businesses or interviews, or personal experiences, again, those would be personal communications, anything unpublished. So again, what we would have is you look at the very bottom, you can talk about, again, a reference to me from a lecture, but you have to still cite it with the parentheses. You would do first initial, last name, comma, and then state personal communication, and then comma, and you would then provide the date that that happened. So with the lectures, you just look at the date that you viewed it on Canvas and took that information. If you're doing it from personal experiences, just pick out a date as close as you can remember to when that occurred. Again, 3 different ways, different examples, most common what you'll use in the course. Now, instead of having a bibliography at the end of every project, with APA style, you'll call the title here is a list of references. Again, what you'll do with this is every bit of research that you used, it doesn't have to be just things you cited. It could be things you just read and you got some ideas from it, but you didn't necessarily cite it. You're going to list those at the end of every project. Okay, so good example is, again, you're going to use the textbook. Again, this is a key point. Even if you don't cite the textbook, you need to list it every time in the mechanics. So if we go down to point 2 with the book, you're going to do the authors again. Then in parentheses, you will do the year of the publication, and then you need to do the title of the work. You can see here down, the example again is the health fitness management textbook that you're going to need for your readings and your quizzes. Key point here is you need the 3rd edition. You'll also make sure, note here, you use capital letters also for the subtitles if there isn't that. Then once you've done the title, you'll do a period, and then you need to do the location of the publication and then that publisher itself. So those are the key components when we're using a textbook. You'll see then different ways to do the style. There's a link there when you get into internet websites and different things. Again, this will be your responsibility to go find out the proper way to do that, and we'll learn as we go and make improvements. But again, you have to have a list of references, not a bibliography, at the end of every written project you submit. All right, our pre-quiz number 2 then, our next task is go to Canvas. You want to go ahead and go to that task list again. You'll see pre-quiz number 2. Complete that on Canvas. I'll review that, submit the grades, but I'll also start to provide some feedback for you then also. Again, big note here, everything you're doing on Canvas for your projects, your main writing projects, have to be submitted on Canvas and checked through, turn it in before I can give a grade. If you're having problems with that, email me and we can go ahead and walk through this together. Thanks.